what makes a teacher great and why. And I jokingly say I have the best students because they have the best teacher. And I I know some of the other teachers in my remote from my AC is not working. I know some of the other teachers personally in town that are teaching drum lessons. And some of them I know of them, but I don't know them. Or I've heard of them and I don't know them. Now I can't pretend to know what goes on with each teacher and their relationship with their students and all of those things. All I know is what I'm experiencing personally myself. I started teaching drum lessons when I was 18 years old, and it was a real surprise. I grew up in Caldwell, and there's a music store there called American Music, and I had taken lessons from three different drum teachers there. Each of them I took lessons from until they stopped teaching, and that would be uh, Jeff Beal. Took lessons from him until he moved away, and then Tim Burke. I took lessons from him until he stopped, and then there was a third guy who only taught for maybe a month, and that's about as long as I took lessons. So I don't really remember much about him. Just remembering he was good, but Jeff and Tim both had huge influence on me in my growth as a drummer. And then my very first drum teacher I had was Dave Goff, and I took lessons from him for a summer when I was 10 years old. But going back to the American Music, I took lessons from those three guys until they stopped teaching, which was when I was a senior in high school. And I went walking into the store one day, and the owner of the store, Don Christensen, said, "There's our new drum teacher." And I was looking around like, me? And I thought there was no way that I was capable of teaching drum lessons. I'm a senior in high school. I was not even 18. I was 17 because I turned 18 after I graduated. So I was a little a little bit younger, but uh, I didn't think that was possible. And he really mentored me and encouraged me to at least try and to teach drum lessons, just, beginner drum lessons. And he said, just teach them what you know how to do, and to think about the process of how I started to learn to play the drums. So I did that. And I taught there in the store on Saturdays for a few hours every Saturday, more or less for about a year. And then there was always interruptions. Like if I was teaching a lesson and they had people in the store, it's a retail store, they're trying to sell instruments. And there's a little bit of noise. So I was constantly interrupted from salespeople to pause for a moment while they, showed a guitar or whatever. And that was a little bit frustrating. So I decided that I would teach lessons out at my dad's shop out on the farm. And that worked out pretty good. I kept a handful of students going, and I did that until I started touring with a band from Florida. So it just had a few students. And it was always something I kind of did on the side here and there as I went along until I started teaching 100% full time 2 years ago. All of that to say is, I still kind of have the same approach as what Don Christensen told me, is just teach them what you know how to do, and the process that I went through on learning how to play drums myself. And of course, I've had other influences in my life as I've gotten older. And I always tell people, like, the biggest influence in my life outside of my parents was my high school band director, Sam Stone, which I've talked about off and on in these videos. And he was super encouraging all the time. Even when I was frustrated, he was always encouraging. And he never said I wasn't capable of doing something. Like, no, you can't do that. And even like when you have teen adolescent stuff going on, we don't always behave properly. But when when you're at that age, you might have ideas of what you want to do that you're really excited about, but maybe the adult person might think whatever your dream is completely ridiculous and unattainable, like completely out of reach. And I see Christy's here. Christy is a music teacher, and uh, Christy, are you still doing that? Timber, teaching makes us better at what we do and learn what we don't do. Yep, absolutely. So Sam Stone was really encouraging, even if I had these dreams of things that he thought might be silly, but he never told that to me. He just always encouraged me, and he helped point me in the right direction of people who would further my music abilities along. And of course, with that came other opportunities. Ended up touring with bands, playing shows, all of that stuff. It's total mindset on the approach to all of that. So with my own students, I always kept that in mind, like Sam Stone being this huge influence on me and always encouraging me. And plus my private drum teachers I almost felt like as a teacher myself, like I have a responsibility to continue carrying that torch and being excited about drumming. And anybody who knows me personally, I've always been like, my world has been drums. Like there's not a whole lot outside of outside of that view. Chrissy says yes. Oh, cool. Um, so you and that comes like down to also having a personality that's willing to teach. And I think I have that personality to be able to teach. And then, you know, um, I saw this quote once years ago, and I'm paraphrasing it, and I don't remember who it was, but I've always kind of had it in my mind. Is like, be careful on what you be careful what you do and act, because you never know who you're influencing. And so you're not going to find pictures of me online where I'm flipping off the camera. And I'm not here to slap anybody on the wrist if I've seen you doing those things. I just, me personally, it's not part of my personality to do that. And plus, as a teacher, I always feel like this responsibility when I'm out and about. You know, being I'm not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination, but I even when I was working at Mountain View High School, like there was this extra pressure that even though I'm playing in midline and playing with other bands and I'm on these stages and I'm more or less in a public eye, so to speak. Not that I'm somebody famous, but you know, I am out performing and doing things that those students from the high school or my private students may see may see me. And I don't want to appear in certain circumstances if you know what I mean. So you're not going to see pictures of me flipping off the camera or doing those kinds of things. Chrissy Love, Don Chrissy, yeah, and Sally, yes, yes, very great people. You know, Christy, funny side note, when I was in high school and just out, I used to mow Don and Sally's lawn. So that was my other stream of revenue was teaching drum lessons and mowing lawns. And then I also worked at the movie theater for 385 an hour. I think it was 385 an hour. I know maybe it was 335 an hour. It seems crazy wages at this point. Gary's here. Gary, morning, sir. You got your coffee? Your let's see what you have. Oat milk. Your oat milk. Oat milk. Do you get milk from oats? I'm not sure how that works exactly. But anyway, so I was always really careful, like especially working at the high school, because I had 20 students that were under me that I'm working with all the time, and you know, I had to say no to certain shows too because I just didn't want to be in those environments. Because I was representing Mountain View High School at the same time, whether I was doing something directly related to the high school or not. So all of that, like maintaining some kind of integrity and being a teacher and being a performer, like those are also connected, and also influences how I teach and what I think is important in teaching. So I can get like the technical side of teaching, learning rhythms, learning about timing, learning about dynamics, all of those things, and teaching somebody to be able to play their instrument and perform in a way that they're just great. And if they're great, then that makes the whole band much better too. And then on top of it, if you have a band full of people that are really established in how they do and their ear training and all of that stuff, that band can really be tight and fantastic. But then parallel to that is you have, and I've mentioned this before, like sometimes students walk in this room and they're having a really bad day. And the reasons for that cover a broad range of things. And so I never know what to expect, when those things happen, other than I made a note here is what makes a great teacher is being willing to listen and be engaged beyond the instrument. And so I think that's really important to the, building relationships with your students and knowing who they are, and they know who I am, and they know that when they come here they can be comfortable and there's no pressure. I do put pressure on in a different way, because as students get better at what they do, I get a little more intense with how I teach. I get more critical, I guess you could say. Um, I've told students as they get better, I'm going to be a little harder on them to push them to be better, not because I'm trying to be mean necessarily. And how I deliver that information, I don't get super intense and angry or anything like that, but I do get more demanding for sure. And all along the way, you start having students who will just unload on you. So sometimes we don't do any drumming whatsoever. They're just having a bad day and they just need somebody to listen, and that's fine, and help navigate certain things that are going on. I had a student that had a bad experience at school in band class and wanted to know how to handle that, and I gave this student advice on that. Plus, also had that same conversation with their parents, so that it wasn't like Fred said, because I could give all the information and advice that I can as their teacher and as a parent myself, but I don't ever want that to supersede what their goals are as parents with their son or daughter. So I do have students that reach out, hey, can I use you as a reference on this job application? That happens quite frequently. And then I've also written letters to senators and congressmen, um, character references for students who were trying. I had a student that had applied for West Point, and he had to go through this process. And part of that was I wrote letters to congressmen and senators for him to help move that along. So there's stuff that's happening outside of the 30 minutes of teaching. And it's really, really cool. I've had other students that were trying to attain scholarships for certain music programs that they were doing, and I had to write letters of recommendation for that, which I totally don't mind doing. And I'm just very honest in those letters, and then watch that has helped them achieve those scholarships. It's really super cool. I've had a handful of students leave me recently because they just graduated high school. And that's kind of one demographic of students that I don't typically have. I really don't have any students between the ages of 20 and 30. And I think that's because if any of us have already lived through our 20s to 30-year-old, that whole decade of our life is so paramount into what we're doing. We're leaving to go to college, and a lot of times that's out of state, or even if it's in state college or universities, those students are just their time is so absorbed into school that they don't have time for drum lessons outside of that. And they're getting full-time jobs or end up having a family, all those kind of things. So that's the one thing, and I don't think it's because people aren't interested in drumming. It's just they've made this big turning point in their life. So I've had, I think, four students that have just graduated high school that have moved on, and I've had a couple of them stop by just to say hi, which is really really cool to have former students drop in just because they want to say hi and see how things are going. I got this letter delivered to me from one of my students who is leaving or may have left already, going on an LDS mission, and he wrote me this letter. I just wanted to read a couple things from it. It was really cool and touching to get this letter, and he hand delivered it and gave me a hug, and he was here with his dad, and much like I was saying about my high school band director, like he being the most influential person in my life outside of my parents. Now, I've had a lot of influential people in my life, but I would say that Sam Stone was kind of the cornerstone of everything else that happened. Like, he really gave me a great foundation to work from, and I've never forgot that. It's just so influential. And now the student Parker is saying a lot of the same things that I had to say about my band teacher. But when you're going to go get lessons from somebody, regardless of the instrument it is, their history is important, I believe. Which is kind of funny to say, because when I started teaching lessons at 17 years old, I didn't have a lot of history. I had a certain skill set, I think. Well, I'm pretty sure I could confidently say that I knew how to do some stuff. and the owner of the music store knew me well enough that he was okay to put the American music brand behind me to be able to teach. So anyway, there's some kind of cool. I'm not going to read the whole letter, but there's a few things that stood out to me, and I just wanted to. And this is not, to brag about myself necessarily. It's just, it's really cool, and maybe it's inspiring to some of the people that are watching, especially if you're a teacher. Who you're influencing and how that's happening. So Parker said, "Dear Fred, I wasn't sure how to start this, so I'm gonna settle on starting with a thank you," which I think is a great start to a letter. He started taking lessons from me when he was in the 8th grade, and until I think his last lesson was the last week of June. So as of just like 3 weeks ago. Being able to learn from you for the last few years has been a joy, and I won't forget it. As you know, I went through many teachers before I found you. And that was part of Parker's story, is that he had taken drum lessons, I believe, from 5 different instructors before he came to me. Now, I don't know. He didn't tell me who these people are, so I can't, I can't, and I wouldn't call those people to the floor anyway. But I still don't know who they are, and he didn't want to tell me. And it was a little irrelevant to me anyway. But he went through several teachers before finding me. So here's what was happening. Some of the teachers were obviously stoned during lessons and didn't care. And I thought that was bizarre. If if you want to be involved in that stuff, I'm not judging anybody on that necessarily, but maybe it doesn't have a place in the teaching environment, because kids are going to pick up on that, maybe even faster than adults. Kids just have a sense of knowing when something's off. Which that was, I told you, he started taking lessons from me in the 8th grade. So if he went through 5 teachers prior to me, I don't know, was that 6th grade, 7th grade? Because here's young kids that whoever this person is teaching, and they're stoned and don't care. That's really super unfortunate. Others were only in it for the money and to get as much money as they could. I would say that me teaching is not a charity. This is how I make a living. Um, but it's super cool. That's something I'm passionate about and want to do. And I uh, do charge for teaching lessons, and my charge is 140 a month to take lessons from me. It's a flat fee per month. I may possibly be the most expensive drum teacher in town. I don't know, but my rate is based on what I need to make as a husband and father and responsible for a household. I don't think of any different as when I owned a landscape company. I charged a premium for my landscape services. So, yeah. So, but you're teaching and you're making it obvious that I'm taking your money, but what else happens is has no bearing on anything. Um, he said, yeah, they're only in it to take the money as much as they could get and could care less about me or what I learned. You were and are different. Your primary concern was to share your love and joy of drumming with me and your other students too. You never shamed or belittled any efforts or lack thereof. I found myself wanting to practice because that meant I could move on and become skilled enough to learn more things. Um, you didn't only teach me how to play the drums, though, so this is part of that connection. You also taught me to stop making excuses. And I have my glasses on. I am solely responsible for my actions and results thereof. Oftentimes, I will perform better than expected, and excuses only make someone seem less capable than they are. So, a lot of the things that he's sharing is exactly how I felt towards my private teachers that I had and my band teacher as well. And like I said earlier, like I've always had this like inner thing in me that felt a responsibility to continue doing what they had done. Now, my band director, Sam Stone, had passed away from cancer a few years ago. It's probably been longer than a few years ago. See, I've been playing with Cliff for about 5, 6. So it's probably been 7. Man, time goes way faster than I think it is. It's pretty crazy, but yeah. And then I'm still in touch with my former drum teachers off and on, and it's really really an awesome thing. So I'm hoping that I will still have a handful of students that will stay in contact with me here until the 12th of never, forever and ever. You also taught me that it's okay to make mistakes as long as efforts are made to be better. Yes, in fact, mistakes and failures are to be expected, and and prove one is to try to learn and grow. Um, it was and is inspiring to see your studio grow and improve over the years. Your studio was a place of safety, fun, and true learning. So if anybody's been here to my studio, it's very small. We call it small but mighty, and it's a comfortable space. Uh, you know, the living room TV isn't over there, or a pile of laundry over there, or anything like. To me, it was always not just associated with drumming, but I wanted to have a space that was inspiring to be in, and us musicians out there want to be inspired. And even if we're not inspired, but we're doing the work, we want to be in that environment that's just like, this is really cool to be in here. And so I have that with the drum room here, and then I've got the control room there. I've got a small little lobby outside of the door. Um, I've got a refrigerator and a snack tray so that students, when they get here, they're welcome to have a bottle of water and grab a bag of chips, and make themselves at home while they're waiting for their turn. Um, or maybe they're thirsty and hungry on the way out. That's all a thing just for them, or my studio guests as well. And so I just wanted an environment that was super fun to be in, inspiring, and like Parker said, a safe space to be. Like I said earlier, some people come here and they've got something going wrong with their day, and they just have this, they want to vent to somebody, and they feel comfortable venting those things to me and asking for advice and those kind of things. And it's some people are way more comfortable sharing stuff with people that aren't mom and dad, or aren't a teacher at school or a friend, because there's no judgment here on what's going on. And even if they're telling me something and I believe in the back of my mind maybe they're kind of at fault for the situation that exists, I still don't call them to the floor and go, well, did you brought this on yourself? No, I just my first job is just to listen and let them say what they want to say. uh so anyway, just giving really quick for us. Oh, for what it's worth, when I was nominated for the Senator's Choice Award and Academic Excellence Award, I picked you as my most important and impactful mentor. That's pretty huge. That means a lot to me, and obviously huge to Parker. And it's really really cool to, after working with somebody for 4.5 years, to get a letter like this. Now I do sometimes get, a thank you card or something sent to me when a student's leaving. A lot of times it's from their parents. Like, you have no idea how different our child is because of seeing you once a week for the past 5 years. Um, it's really, really cool. And you are one of 4 teachers, mentors that I know have had pivotal in my development for the better. While I, of course, think of you as a friend, you will always have a deep respect and gratitude. Thank you for nourishing my joy for drumming and ultimately my desire to improve and grow. Um, yeah. And then then he calls me Mr. Fisher at the end. Um, that's cool. My students don't necessarily call me Mr. Fisher when they're here, but I think that's a sign of respect. Um, when I was working at Mountain View, um, the students were required to call me Mr. Fisher, and I think that in a lot of those situations, that amount of formality to what we're doing is really important to the relationship that you have with them. I think you can be their buddy and their friend, but first and foremost, you're the teacher. And so being Mr. Fisher was, I think, important to my work at the school. I don't ask that of my private students. This is less formal. This is one-on-one instruction. And but I do have some people call me Mr. Fisher. Very few, but there are a few. And then a lot of the younger kids, their parents have them call me Mr. Fred. I have this young student. He's 5, maybe 6. Um, as a thank you at the end of the class, he always comes and gives me a big hug. And his family's a lot of hugging going on in this family, and it's really touching to see this little child come up to me and thank you, Mr. Fred, and gives me a big hug, and it's always appreciated. Not that I expect my students to be hugging me all the time. One of my other students, Jim Reidenbaugh, if you know him at all, he's a working drummer here in town. He shows up and he always gives me a big bear hug. He gives me a big bear hug when he leaves, and that appreciation is always cool. So, what makes a great teacher? Just my own experience is just having that relationship with your students, um, that they know they're in a safe environment, just like Parker said in his letter. They feel safe here, and I always tell my students we're just 2 drummers hanging out. And when I tell them that, they seem to, like, their whole demeanor really relaxes. Like, yeah, we're here to learn this, and I'm here to turn up the heat and to make you better. And a lot of the stuff is exercises that we work on, and some of them are like, oh, I'm doing this same exercise again. There's one exercise I have for my students that I make them play relentlessly every week, And if they do it right, it just takes like 5 minutes to get through it. But I hammer all my students on this one particular exercise. And some of them look at it like, this isn't really what I signed up for. But I make them do it anyway. And then they have this light bulb moment where they're like, oh, you've made me do this a million times. And then I had this thing happen and I was like able to just play it and I didn't have to think about it. Like they could see it written in the music or they heard it like that ear training. And they suddenly know this big bump in their ability. And then I go, aha, that's it. Because my drum teachers hammered me so hard on the same stuff. And I think the results of that are quite good. So I do the same with my students. But